In the HBO series The Gilded Age, Bertha Russell, a wealthy and fiercely ambitious woman of humble origins, relentlessly pursues social ascension as she orchestrates a marriage between her daughter Gladys and the impoverished Duke of Buckingham. Determined to transcend the stigma of being nouveau riche in a society where old money sits atop the social strata, Bertha views the alliance as the ultimate conquest of society, exchanging American wealth for British aristocratic legitimacy. The Buckinghams, once powerful but now financially depleted after centuries of indolence, see the union as a lifeline to preserve their estate. The negotiations between George Russell and the Duke prove contentious, with the Duke initially refusing George's proposals and demanding more than the substantial dowry offered, pushing hard for terms that would keep his estate afloat. Eventually, George relents, agreeing to the demands with one critical stipulation: that the additional funds be placed in Gladys's name, a strategic move that protects her interests while satisfying the Duke's needs. In the midst of these high-stakes dealings, Gladys barely tolerates Hector, but gives in to her mother's ambitions, locking herself in her room before the ceremony and weeping beneath her veil as she departs for England, her fate sealed not by love, but by the cold arithmetic of social strategy. The irony at the heart of the episode lies in the transactional nature of the union. A family rich in wealth but poor in status, striking a bargain with a family rich in status but poor in wealth. The storyline draws inspiration from a real aristocratic event where Consuelo Vanderbilt was forced to marry the 9th Duke of Marlborough, with her family paying a $2.5 million dowry. Like Gladys, Consuelo's wedding was a flawless affair and the envy of high society, but was ultimately a loveless marriage. American heiresses such as Consuelo came to be known as dollar princesses, trading their family's wealth for prestigious European titles, where their personal happiness was sacrificed for social and financial advancement. The Gilded Age is a sobering reminder that prestige and power have always been commodities to be bartered, where money chases legacy and legacy clings to relevance, proving that the Gilded Age never truly ended, it simply rebranded. When Charles proposed to Lady Diana Spencer in the early 1980s, he may have lacked emotional intelligence, but he understood he wasn't simply marrying some girl. Diana was no ordinary commoner elevated from obscurity. She arrived with impeccable credentials, an aristocratic lineage spanning centuries, with her ancestral seat at Althorpe rivaling royal estates in magnificence. Diana possessed her own fortune, title, and a substantial trust fund, ensuring she would never be hung out to dry. When they divorced, Diana didn't leave empty-handed. She received over £17 million in a lump sum and a yearly stipend of around £400,000. She kept access to royal jets, apartments at Kensington Palace, and, perhaps most importantly, her dignity, which the firm tried and failed to shred. In medieval and early modern England, noble women were expected to bring a dowry into the union, a form of prenuptial insurance known as a marriage settlement. These agreements ensured that the woman would be financially protected should her husband perish in war, pestilence, or more commonly, moral disgrace. Though the practice ended with the Married Women's Property Act of 1882, the cultural expectation lingered. An aristocratic bride came with something: land, money, titles, or influence. Which brings us to Kate. When William first met Kate, the Middletons put on a show intended to create the illusion of wealth. Party pieces, as we've discussed now so many times before, was the collateral for Kate's social mobility, but as we now know, party pieces was merely a front. The reality is that the bulk of the Middletons' show of wealth came from the least pretentious member of the family, Michael Middleton. It was through a trust fund inherited by Michael that Carol was able to put on a performance of wealth with the help of Uncle Gary, who, with his flashy yacht and Ibiza villa, provided the final bit of stagecraft needed to ensnare the easily snareable William. By 2023, it all came crashing down when party pieces went into administration with debts north of £2.6 million. Now, folks, I don't think people realize how embarrassing this was, not only for William, but for the firm. The press downplayed it, but make no mistake, Charles was peeved, realizing what his mother knew all along, that the monarchy had been duped. By the latter part of 2023, it was clear that Kate was being ostracized. Her position in the family was becoming ever more precarious. The pressure weighed on her tremendously, and she took it out on herself. The truth had finally come to light. Kate brought nothing to the table. She had no title, no manor house, no career, and no money. What Kate did bring to the table was a commitment to aristocratic leisure. Historically speaking, nobility viewed labor as a vulgar necessity reserved for the poor. In Gilded Age Britain and America, idle elegance was considered the mark of superior breeding. Carol Middleton, keenly aware of this, shielded Kate from anything resembling real work to preserve the illusion of effortless privilege. But Queen Elizabeth was not fooled. The Queen, forged in wartime austerity, had her doubts and reportedly dubbed Kate Duchess Dolittle. To paper over the scandal of Kate's indolence, Carol arranged a fig leaf job at Jigsaw, a gig that seemed more like a favor than a real job, where Kate's main duties involved showing up occasionally and playing the part. She had also briefly worked as a waitress, but even she admitted she wasn't very good at it. Oh, and she did work on a yacht, where she was famously known as Beautiful Kate, but I'll leave that right there. And for all we know, Kate's disappearance last year may well have been a separation caused in part by the financial fallout of the Middletons. The couple, up to that point, was living a tumultuous marriage. There may even have been talks of a divorce. William started putting out feelers in the press about being a solo dad, and during this time, we had no idea where Kate was, but it was fairly obvious that William had no access to her. Now, had a separation agreement been discussed, I highly doubt Kate would have been considered to receive a settlement as generous as the one Princess Diana received. Carol, for all her delusions of aristocratic grandeur, is not a skilled negotiator. And when the coup de grace was announced and Cancer Kate 2.0 made her debut, that put the kibosh on any talk of a divorce. In short, William is stuck with Kate, and Kate has nowhere to go. When the press reported a couple weeks ago the much talked about secret summit where the Sussexes PR rep met with Charles's comms team, the British press, starved for information about the Sussexes, practically ran out of ink speculating about the nature of the meeting. Of course, there was the usual Harry is desperate to come back narrative they've been pushing since he and Meghan left, as if Harry, who has forged his own path as a philanthropist, a humanitarian, and a global brand really, Harry, who has made a life for himself with a beautiful, intelligent, and successful woman in her own right, Harry, who has two beautiful children of his own, would be willing to crawl back to live under William's thumb, begging for every shilling and to be used as fodder for the press to prop up his brother, much like the fate of so many spares that came before him. Somehow they really think they can convince the public that Harry would rather give up his freedom to return to being William's punching bag. Nah, I suspect that Charles realizes that for the monarchy to survive, it desperately needs Harry. There's no denying the obvious truth. Harry and Meghan dominate the headlines. And if there's one thing Charles hates more than anything, it's being ignored by the press. Weeks ago, when Harry visited the minefields of Angola with images evoking the memory of the late Princess Diana, everyone was blindsided. The press had no idea he would be there, which means neither did the firm. And folks, were you aware that it was Camilla's birthday? Apart from this highly airbrushed image released on their socials, Camilla's birthday caused barely a stir. And perhaps no one was more blindsided than William, who had the unfortunate coincidence of jetting off to yet another luxury vacation while images of Harry dominated the press. It's now been reported that in order to avoid constantly being outflanked and eclipsed by Harry, the press requested that he share his schedule, a proposition so laughable yet indicative of the real state of affairs. Harry and Meghan generate clicks and therefore sales. Despite the constant suggestions that they are irrelevant, Harry effortlessly outshines them all. And with William constantly leaking negative stories about his father while shirking his royal duties, Charles and Camilla are increasingly feeling the weight of their shrinking significance. By now you've heard the reports echoed around the world that 11 out of 12 gardeners at Highgrove have walked off the job, citing poor pay and dehumanizing treatment. In one instance, Charles, like some petulant medieval king, was so annoyed at one particular gardener who did not know enough about a flower to Charles's liking that he exclaimed, "Don't put that man in front of me again." The workers cite a toxic workplace with the bored king frequently on the rampage about some triviality or other. Now we know that the royals are notoriously frugal, not when it comes to themselves, but when it comes to paying their workers a livable wage. Rather than increase the pay of his Highgrove gardeners, Charles instead suggested that they be replaced by Ukrainian refugees. Folks, this is just incredible. Charles has a net worth of over £1 billion, and he can barely pay his gardeners minimum wage, holding on to the antiquated belief that anyone should find it a privilege to sacrifice themselves to the monarch. These people are living in the past. They dream of a time when they could casually order the execution of anyone who offends them, and where curtsies are demanded to show groveling deference and to prop up fragile egos. Soon after the Highgrove hit piece, news slowly began to leak about the Wales's fifth, or is it sixth, vacation of the year. The British press tried as much as they could to keep mum that William and Kate were once again swanning off on some luxury holiday on a yacht owned by a member of the Abu Dhabi royal family, a family that has long had ties to human rights violations. The press tried to throw smoke screens, at one point claiming it wasn't the Waleses at all, but Kylie Jenner, who was on that yacht. But eventually, it became impossible to keep the lid on the story. The Daily Mail gave in, claiming it was only a £40 million yacht, as if that would be enough to relieve the sting. Britain is currently facing a cost of living crisis it hasn't seen in the last 40 years. With inflation elevated at around 6%, food and energy prices continuing to soar, and over 14 million people living in poverty. William's homelessness initiative, Homewards, which never seems to leave the planning stages, is pushed as one of his life's missions. while in the background, William and Kate are apparently planning to move to yet another home. Fort Belvedere, former home of Edward and Wallace, resembling something more like a penal institution than a residence, is now squarely in their sights, with renovation costs expected to exceed £5 million. It's been reported that Adelaide Cottage, the place I suspect that Kate has been living separately from William for some time now, has somehow gotten too small for the family. Now, folks, these are people who already have access to Kensington Palace, Sandringham Estate, Windsor Castle, Amner Hall. The list goes on. Yet they are never satisfied. But somehow we are supposed to believe that William is committed to ending homelessness. I guess he is, for himself. And whenever they do attend a work engagement, they end up looking like parolees who've been forced to do community service. William and Kate are not cut out for duty. It was reported a couple weeks ago that Princess Anne, known as the royal workhorse, is pissed at the Waleses' lack of initiative. Compared to other working royals, William and Kate rank close to the bottom in output, with Kate actually ranking dead last. Of course, whenever this is brought up, we are reminded again and again of her never-ending cancer recovery, whatever that means, from, according to her preventative cancer treatment for what the press previously reported were pre-cancer cells. Now look, folks, I'm tired of litigating this issue. Clearly, there are major holes in the cancer narrative. So it's really up to you if you choose to believe it or not. I just find it interesting that it gets dragged out anytime anyone questions Kate's work ethic or her need for frequent vacations, or holidays as the Brits say. And look, I've already presented my assessment of Kate. It's not that complicated. She is an introvert. She doesn't really want to work. She regularly sees other women in her set who live leisurely lives, have frequent holidays, and never have to worry about media scrutiny. She wishes that was her life. But alas, she chose instead to be a member of a family that finds itself increasingly under pressure to justify their increasing costs at public expense. And it's been clear for some time now that Kensington Palace and Clarence House are at odds with each other regarding the future of the family. William is an entitled bully who's not very bright. Charles and Camilla know that he's been leaking to the press for months stories about Charles's illness and what he can't wait to do when he becomes king. He knows his father can't do much about it except to unleash his minions in the press. Which brings me back to the secret summit. It was quietly reported around the same time that Camilla has been influencing Charles to change his will in order to ensure that Harry is disinherited, with her own son, Tom Parker Bowles, set to receive a hefty sum. William, as you can guess, was incandescent with rage for having been left out of the meeting, or perhaps disobeyed. It's no secret that both he and Camilla have been actively preventing Charles from seeing Harry. And as much as they despise each other, they are willing to fly under the same standard, united in their hatred toward Harry. William is forever angry because Harry left right before he inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, robbing him of the pleasure of wielding his unearned wealth and thereby financially controlling his brother. Harry was expected to be an obedient spare, sacrificing his happiness and freedom, much like Princess Margaret, who met an early end after years of alcohol abuse and a broken heart. That was supposed to be Harry. Camilla hates Harry because he refuses to give her the deference she believes she deserves. And of course, Harry refuses to curtsy to her. Folks, you don't realize how serious Camilla takes curtsying. She is so desperate for the respect and admiration that the late Princess Diana enjoyed that she believes she can force it out of everyone in the form of a curtsy. Here she was at Wimbledon, ambling her way through the stands, a trail of aging shrews prodding the paying customers to rise in her presence. The crowd barely acknowledged her. This is a deeply insecure woman, desperate for approval she knows she will never fully get. And Harry's recalcitrance only reminds her that, for most people, she will always be nothing more than the other woman. So this is the true picture of the British monarchy today. A petulant king easily rattled by flowers and leaky pens. An imposter queen chasing respectability while at the same time running away from her home-wrecking past. An entitled heir who does not want to be compelled to work and who plans to rule through WhatsApp messages. And a Princess of Wales barely able to function due to a myriad of cascading issues, not the least of which is an unhappy marriage. This is a monarchy collapsing under the weight of its own absurdity, and in an institution designed to turn on itself, perhaps this is the natural end it deserves. So drop a line, let me know what you all think. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you all in the next video.